is
Hi.
Dr. Meredith Jones. And can you tell us your title, please?
Sure. I'm called a reader in the UK. In the US, that's basically a professor, and my discipline is sociology, and I specialise in thinking about the body, and especially in thinking about appearances and aesthetics and the things that we might choose to do to our bodies in terms of appearances and aesthetics and what those things mean culturally and socially.
That's awesome. I wanted to collaborate with Meredith because I saw her on a talk show.
Meredith, you wanted to say something.
It's about the comparing the children with the ears and the eyes is a really, really important one, because I think what we risk in this sort of debate and this sort of discussion is a kind of reverse racism, where it's all right for so-called white people to have certain kinds of cosmetic procedures or body modifications, but it's not all right for Asians or Indians or Turkish people or other Mediterranean people to have certain other kinds of cosmetic procedures.
I was really distressed being on the panel of that, because I felt that the host was actually haranguing the people that had been invited on.
3 years ago, we were fascinated by a growing trend in cosmetic surgery, people changing their racial features.
So I felt that there was a foregone conclusion that these people were trying to look white or Western or European. Yeah. And what she was doing was absolutely not listening to what those people were actually saying.
I'm not trying to look Western. There are many Asians out there with double folds eyelids. For example, my boyfriend, he's got quite a large crease. My friends, they all got large creases as well. My crease was quite small. I just wanted to make it look more defined. Yeah, it's not about trying to look Western or anything like that. I think it's just helps to improve my eyes to make it look better.
So even though all of them were saying, no, I'm not trying to look white, and trying to explain to her the complexities of their decision and the difficulties and all of the, really intricate things that they'd thought about connected with their surgeries or their whatever they'd decided to do, she just wasn't listening.
Yes, I am still Asian, and I am proud to be Asian. I live, in a Western society, but you guys aren't Asian. Some of you aren't Asian, and you haven't been through what I've been through, going to a new school or meeting people, and they're like, oh, she's Asian. Oh, she might be like in those cartoons, Ching Chong Wah, and say all that kind of stuff. And they judge you based on what you...
So it's much, much more complicated than trying to look white.
Right.
And it does infuriate me.
It infuriates me too. And I always tell people they're trying to look better, what they think is better version of themselves. And I just want to be clear. I do think that there are people who go about doing it from more of a non-self-acceptance way. Example, Michael Jackson, who probably had BDD, body dysmorphic disorder, and probably should have been turned down for some of his later surgeries. I think that to that extreme, I'm not going to say that there's not any kind of that there could have been a little bit more self-acceptance, or maybe he really was drastically. I do think that there are some people who drastically change, but I think the people in the audience, that woman, when you're doing minor things, sometimes, it's just little tweaks, and in that case, I think that they were trying to just look like a better version of themselves.
Kind of something that we do as a culture, and it continues today. It's like this foregone conclusion that if a white person has cosmetic surgery, that's kind of because of a form of self-love, that's about self-improvement and loving yourself and doing the best for yourself, making the best of what you've got. Yeah. But if Asian or Black or Hispanic person has cosmetic surgery, that's immediately thought of as being a form of self-hate. For non-white people having cosmetic surgery, it's like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Yeah. If you do have it, you're damned because you must hate yourself, and that's a really bad thing.
Yeah.
If you don't have it, but you happily love yourself the way you are, well, that's not acceptable either.
Right. Yeah.
You're not beautiful in the way that mainstream teaches us what beauty is.
So that brings us to the whole discussion today, which is something that I've been noticing in the media, which is a lot of bias, a lot of articles that are titled and written that claim that when somebody of Asian descent or African descent gets something done, they're getting it done to look more European or Western.
Like, as a sociologist, a big part of my job is actually just listening to people. It's asking questions and really listening to the answers and going in to my research without actually having preconceived ideas of what it is I'm going to find. And in all of my research, which was initially, I researched white women who were having cosmetic surgery, and I've just completed a huge project that included all sorts of Asian people about their cosmetic surgeries. And in fact, most of the Asian people we interviewed for that project were Chinese. And interestingly, they were Chinese people who'd chosen to have their surgery in Korea. For a lot of Chinese people who travel to Korea, what they're looking for is a kind of so-called Gangnam look, which is highly manufactured, which is somewhat Japanese, but also somewhat doesn't really look like humans. It looks like a manga kind of fantasy manga kind of features. And it's really, as soon as you actually speak to people about why they're having things done, there's really nobody who says they want to look Western or European.
And your patients, when they come to you and they ask for this surgery, how many of them are saying they want to actually change their racial features, that they don't want to look as Asian?
Not really. I mean, they don't really ask for the changing racial features. They just want, as I told you before, they want to get just simply, I want to look more beautiful.
So at no point did they say they wanted to look white.
Yes.
In fact, at one point, one of our interviewees sort of laughed and said, I don't want to look white. White women have rough skin. And the two of us interviewing her were both white women, and we were sort of like, oh no, like suddenly we felt ugly, with this horrible rough skin.
So I attended 2 non-invasive cosmetic conferences in which someone in the audience commented on, an Asian person having blepharoplasty and wanting to look more Western, and I had to or Caucasian, and I have to bite my tongue, and I'm mad at myself for not speaking out against that there, raising my hand and commenting. But why aren't people calling it out? How would that make people feel if there were articles titled Caucasian women or European women get lip injections to look more African or more Asian?
The obvious people to call this out, as to stand up and write articles and talk about the real reasons for having things done would be the people who do them themselves, right? Actual Asian people who've had blepharoplasties that are nothing to do with wanting to look Western or Caucasian.
Yeah.
But there's so much stigma around it that those people tend not to stand up and say anything.
Oh, because they're already getting stigmatized.
Yeah, I think so. So I think an oppressed group is less likely to stand up and really tell the truth about something. They're also unlikely to get heard, probably less likely to be published. Every individual has personal psychological reasons for doing things, but they also have cultural and social reasons for doing things that they might be aware of, that they might not be aware of, but that none of them mean we shouldn't believe what people say about their own decisions.